Hi, welcome again to another video. My name is Stephen Diebold, and today I wanted to get right into our topic, furthering on from that last subject matter that we were going over, which was the nurturance factor. So I just want to kind of make this really simple and interesting. I was looking at some materials this morning on Google, and I thought this was interesting when I did a search. What actually came up when I was looking at this concept of how do people feel good about themselves and for what reasons do they feel good about themselves. And I think the most interesting thing I found on this giant image search that I did, if we think of Joe and we see Joe is kind of in this state of unsure about himself and what he's doing and what's going on. When I went to look up in Google what came up for a particular image for this is what I found, which is most interesting, are these images right here. You can see this is this is the most interesting thing here is all these measuring systems, these measuring sticks that people are using, like I've talked about in the last one. A picture of a mirror and a cat. What you see about yourself matters most, and how you think highly about yourself, and all these things. And you've seen this like on SNL and comedy skits of people trying to feel good about themselves, and you see the confidence type fear of an explosion of confidence being pumped up. So what's interesting, you see these self-confident images here, and pictures of happiness, and these broken images of how people see themselves, and this heavy-set guy, and you see all these different images that are really. It's interesting how Google kind of sees what we're thinking about ourselves, because Google is the giant engine, if you will, and you can see that Google kind of makes everything relevant, and it picks out what's relevant to us, because obviously we're searching for something on Google, and it tries to give us the most relevant things. And so when we look at our culture, we can kind of look to Google to kind of see, what people are digesting and consuming, as far as it comes to information, or just what they're looking up, or what images they're uploading, or what types of things this giant engine is finding relevant. And it's just interesting how for images, Google Images that I picked up, this is what is coming up. All these different baby with glasses, trying to be cool, low self-esteem, man's best friend, next to the mass production of alcohol. So you've got this like this positive affirmation kind of thing going on here of use the talent you possess, and it's a constant thing, that is really interesting to me, how Google is seeing the same thing over and over again of this sense of issue that we think poorly of ourselves. And so when you go back to the examples that I gave in the other videos, you'll start to see this kind of is starting to gel together with what we have here, because if you have all that kind of this giant kind of thing here of these measuring sticks, if you will, of it's like a giant measuring stick here. If this is a really bad example of a measuring stick, but I'll make a measuring stick here, if you will, and put the measuring things on here, and let's say this is a person, and there's his nose, and let's say this is, Jeff, whatever, and there's Jeff's hair. And what's interesting here is if we look at, let's get a better color here. If we look at these dimensions that we've been talking about before, it seems to me that everyone is looking outwardly to get a sense of how they should feel inwardly, which is the most interesting piece because how else do you wake up? You wake up one day and everyone has, like I've talked about, those dimensions of metrics. And these metrics we're using for our happiness, metrics we're using for how do I feel today, metrics for using how do I feel about myself today, and we have this giant kind of equation of going on in our head about um, what we basically check in on, which I would also consider to be called let's call that a thermostat of how we feel about ourselves. This kind of thermostat thing going on here of boiling point of how should I feel about myself. So if this is a temperature gauge, just I don't know, make that a temperature gauge of some sort. Um, and if that's like our temperature that we're looking at, and these are the degrees, you can see the pointer here, figuring out where you're at on the thermostat level, depending on any of these things. So, but it's all dependent externally out here, out in an external world that we cannot control. So it's the most interesting thing with human beings because we're not isolated people. We can't sit, um, you know, in an isolated area of if this is the world and we just go pick our little place in there and just sit there and don't talk to anybody and stay away from everyone and act afraid. Obviously, we can't do that. We can't live like that. But the other part that we also can't do is look to everyone else and evaluate constantly. This like we're in this constant competition or game that we're playing with the world as if this is a giant football field and we're looking to compete always with the other side. And so what was the most interesting piece to me when I thought about this and looked at Google and I saw these images on here, what was the most interesting for me is this. You're sitting in your bed and you're laying down and this is, at night and you're snoozing, and you're doing your stuff, and you're sitting there just doing, your being as you will, and not thinking about anything other than maybe you're, dreaming about, an island or money or whatever it is you're dreaming about, whatever strange dreams you're doing, but you're doing nothing but being. And so this just seems to be the only time that your mind really isn't consciously active with you, having to think about things and process and stuff like that in a conscious way. Then you get up, and the minute you get up, all of a sudden now, okay, now you have to be conscious again. And now, what's funny is this person gets up, and if we go back to this Google example, we see them get up, and what do they start thinking? They start thinking maybe either immediately or slowly throughout the day, this kind of stuff. All these weird negative messages. And so I thought about why do these people have these negative messages? Why do some people have more negative messages than others? So what is the difference here? I mean, what makes somebody who's over here feeling like this different from somebody over here who's feeling like this? And then I thought about these people who go overboard in this department, and they get into the where they're arrogant, and they kind of are full of themselves, so they go too far, and then they get into being a narcissist. narcissist, if that's, I think that's how you spell it, narcissists. If it's wrong, whatever, it doesn't matter. Um, and they get into this like over like puffing up of oneself, and then they become unrelatable, and they just they don't have any thoughts of how to improve themselves. So I began thinking about you go from this state, this sleeping state here, to this wake state, and what I thought was interesting is um, the internal kind of, if you will, the if this is the center of your, if like a fuel pump, if you will, of, and this is also a fuel pump. Both of these together are fueling the body. You know, one with thoughts and one with blood. And I thought, um, if our brain is constantly giving us negative thoughts, what is that coming from when you get up, and how do you cure that? If the cure is you're trying to go outside into all these metrics here externally, and you can't get those things met, you can't improve those metrics because you can't control them. So this external force or external desire is uncontrollable. This is uncontrollable. So the mind will continue to control a ball. Sorry for the spelling. Uncontrollable. This external piece. So I began to think about this, and I thought, how does the person who wakes up, and I just showed you those examples, how does that person get up and feel positive about themselves? They get up and they feel, hey, you know what? I'm a good person. I like things about me. I know there's some things that are about me that might not be so great, but at the end of the day, I think I'm pretty good. How do they get there? And you know, it brought me back to their level of nurturing. And that nurturing, unfortunately, comes from an external source, because you can't nurture yourself inside forever. At some point, you are going to be looking at some metric, you know, a mile 1, you know, 1 through 10. There is some measuring stick or system, you know, A through F. You know, do I get an F or an A? I mean, we've set up this measuring system in our society to measure things to determine what? Its value. Value. So value is how is value determined? Well, there's metrics. So metrics are the problem with our society, is everything is metric driven. Everything is driven by some type of measuring system which determines value, because if you can't measure it, there's no value to it, whether even if it's an emotional value system. So let me pull this all together here with what I'm getting at to kind of make this simple. I've drawn these things, and these kind of things might be a little confusing, but let me get my little thing here to show you what I mean by here. If you have this guy who's not feeling good, Joe, he's looking externally and using this metric equation to try to feel good about himself. That's not working. Then he reads all these self-help books and all this other garbage to try to reprogram his brain into thinking differently with some better thought life and better things. But that is a bit difficult, because every time he's faced, he goes back out into the world. What happens? What happens. This is what happens. And so we'll get to that in our next video. Right now I'm out of time, so I like to keep these things short. So join me in the next video and look on for finding out what actually happens. Thanks.